it did. And just capture key points. You don't have to write a long-winded summary or anything.
Okay, you're at the hour. So go ahead, Jim.
So this is welcome everyone. As we are at the top of the appointed hour here. Welcome to Antoine Rashurin. I am James Galvin. We are your co-chairs for registration extensions. And this is our virtual Prague meeting. Shame we can't be in that actual location, but we will take what we can get. So this is our usual note well. Folks should all be very familiar with that. The colloquial expression is basically whatever you do belongs to the IETF, as long as you're here and participating. So anything you say, write, or otherwise is part of the activities of the IETF. So just keep that in mind. I'm sure most folks here have seen that quite a bit. This is our agenda for today overall. It's a standard agenda. We just kind of fill in different elements for each meeting. So it should look pretty familiar to you. We are in our welcome and introduction here. I do need to start with the welcome and introductions here. And the first thing we need is a note scribe. We're not going to do a Jabber scribe. We don't think that that's necessary. Plenty of folks here can type in from the chat room. We'll be keeping an eye on it ourselves. If anybody wants to read something out from the chat room, please just raise your hand and provide that. But the Meet Echo chat and the notes pad is going to suffice for us. But we do need someone to type into Etherpad for us and keep some notes. While we're waiting for a volunteer, I'll just quickly say, we always like to mention document management in general. Just, remind people, this is kind of a slow rolling working group in general. And, it's just useful to tell people and remind people that work moves when people progress it. If you're interested in something moving along, then, you have to say that and mention that and drive that on the mailing list. And sometimes you also have to remind your chairs a couple of times over to move some things forward. But we'll take care of that. And I see that Alex has his hand up in the queue. We'll break for a moment and let Alex speak up. Go ahead, please.
I can do notes if you like.
That would be awesome, Alex. Thank you very much. And of course, be sure to put your name in the Etherpad as the note taker. That should be recorded for posterity in the proceedings. So we very much appreciate that.
Just to clarify, I plan to use the code EMD. Is that what you mean by Etherpad, or do you want me to do the minutes anywhere else?
Yes, it's code MD. Yeah.
Yeah, it's code MD. I'm sorry, I've just been misspeaking. You're right. But yeah, with the link at the top of the page there. So thanks very much for that. The last thing, and welcome and introductions, is we always like to talk about document shepherds. We really are trying to make sure that we have a document shepherd, and we've had actually quite a few, so that's a good thing. Special attention should be given to those. People should get recognition for it. And we appreciate those who had volunteered. We have a number of people who've done some first-time document shepherding, and that's been awesome. But it's a great way just to get involved and really understand the process. And if you really are in tune with a particular document, being a shepherd is a good thing. So it really helps us out and helps out the working group too. Okay. So next on our agenda, published works. We've had a banner year in 2020. So we have 3 RFCs that have been published since the last time we met in November. Data escrow, the RDAP query parameters got updated, and the partial, for sorting and paging, I'm sorry, query parameters for sorting and paging and partial response. Those are extensions to RDAP, and they've both been published. So that's a good thing, all 3 of those. And then moving right along here, we have our status of existing work. Again, we've kind of had a banner year in 2020. We have quite a number of documents that are somewhere along the way in the publication cycle. And so that's been quite a year of success for us. I think this is our best year in terms of documents moving forward. So the data escrow, the objects mapping document, the data escrow document has already been published. The objects mapping document is imminent. It's on its way. We, of course, have updated 7482 and 7483, which are the RDAP query and response documents. They are about to be upgraded to full internet standards. Those are also imminent. And it's worth noting that 7480 and 7481 are also going to be elevated to internet standards, but without errata in their case. So in that case, it's just a process step that the IESG goes through to take those documents as is to upgrade them and elevate them. And Jim Reed, you have your hand up. Go ahead, please.
Hi, Jim. I'm going to put you on the spot here. What's your best guess when these documents will escape the RFC editor's queue? Or is that a stupid question?
Yeah, that's a really good question. Oh, Barry, you might want to say something. Go ahead.
I joined at just the right time. It is definitely not a stupid question, but it's a question that's very difficult to answer. However, the RFC editor, since the publication of Cluster 238, has been turning things around reasonably quickly. So I don't know. I guess I'm guessing probably within where are we? We're in it. Probably sometime mid-April is my guess. But it could be sooner and it could be longer. It's really hard to tell.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, thanks, Jim, and thanks, Barry, for that question. And again, 7480 and 7481, which are part of the RDAP series of documents, they're just going to elevate without errata, so that's just a status change. But we do go through a process in the IETF to reflect that so everyone knows it. And then as we move up here, I'll also just mention, you'll see later, 7484 is a new document for us. So the last document in the RDAP series just has some errata, but we're taking that on board, give it a quick review, and that would then also move into the publication process here, along with 7482 and 7483 biz. So that's a good thing. We also have the secure authorization info, the auth info code in EPP. We have a document there which just sort of extends the security options for the auth info code, and of course the unhandled namespaces document, which applies generically to EPP transactions and its documentation. But those are also all in the publication cycle, and hopefully they'll all move along fairly smartly. But you know, kudos to us. You know, thank you to the working group. It's just a bit of process that's going on, but I expect all of these things to proceed. And that's just a good reflection on us that we're able to move along so much work and so many things. But as we see, we have a number of things that are also still on our agenda to move along and get into. So if there are no questions about those, we'll jump into a quick look at some existing work. And Antoine, were you going to pick up here, or did you want me to do this next one too?
It's okay. I can do it. You can do it. Whatever.
Okay. Well, over to you. I will keep showing the slides. And
so next. So we have 4 documents which don't have a presentation for this time. We have registry maintenance, and that basically has been in working group last call already, but it was taken back after working group last call because there was too narrow consensus. We still had quite some comments during working group last call, and actually we didn't have any people that were actively responding that they would that they approved this document. So I don't know if any of the authors want to have a comment on this, on what their actions are going to be. Let's see if we have.
so before you call on Jody, I should probably jump in fairness. Jody is one of the authors and he was going to speak, but I'll spare him and acknowledge that I am actually the document shepherd for this document. This is a work item for Antoine and I. You know, I have to review the issue that's going on here, and then, you know, as part of being a document shepherd, and provide some comments to Antoine in particular, since he's going to be the chair that's guiding this work. So this is not on the authors. This is on me as document shepherd, not having caught up with providing a summary here that we can then work with and figure out what to do with. I mean, so Antoine's assessment there about not really having full consensus in our working group is appropriate. And we just haven't figured out what we want to do about that yet, and to make a proposal back to the working group to deal with it. So that's on us, and it's more precisely on me as document shepherd.
Yes, I was more trying to, you know, look for, you know, what can we do to get this document progressed. It's not only handling the comments that were made during working group last call, but also I think we should be looking for support before we put something into working group last call. There must be some sort of a sense that people have read it and they're going to support it during working group last call. So Jody is in the queue. So Jody, go ahead. No longer.
Hi, can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right, I can't hear anybody right now, but as long as you can hear me. We've been working extensively with Jim Gould on this and really appreciate his feedback. Tobias has updated the document. I think we have addressed all of Jim's concerns with the document, and we feel it's probably should be going to working group last call, as we've addressed all the concerns that Jim has with it, except for one, the version number, which we'll update the version number when we put it in last call. That's where we're at with this right now. Thanks.
Yeah. So thank you, Jody. What I wanted to highlight is also for people in the working group. You know, we need support others than the authors during a working group last call. So if you see that a document is nearing working group last call, please review it and at least have a positive comment during working group last call, so we can declare consensus. But if it's only, you know, one or two people responding to a working group last call, we cannot call out consensus that everybody has read the document. So James, go ahead. James, you have audio?
Can you hear me?
Yeah, now we can hear you.
Oh, sorry about that. Yeah, I just wanted to mirror what Jody had said. I wanted to thank the authors for working through my long list of feedback, and at this point, I feel like they've, with the latest draft, have addressed my feedback.
Okay, thank you for that, James. So, if other people than James will read this document, then we could probably move it to a second working group last call. Then simple registration reporting. That's also something on our list. Jim, do you have something to say about this, or Joseph?
Just a slow roll. You know, we submitted a revised document with some minor edits, but we haven't pressed on it on the mailing list. So it's due to get some discussion going again on the mailing list, and we'll take it to there to do it.
Okay, so no real progress or upgrades. Good. Then the OpenID document. Now that's been in our queue for a long time, and of course we know that we're waiting for some decisions being taken there in ICANN to see if we need to adjust the technical specifications here. We will be talking about milestones at the end of this meeting. This has been on our milestones for quite a long time, and we are going to move it along again. But just to give everybody a chance to talk about this document, Scott, do you have any news on this document? So Scott was here, right?
Yep, I'm here, Antoine. Thank you very much. I did get one, I think it was a private comment from Tom Harrison with a very tangible suggestion to add to the document. And I think I'm going to get to that, when I get some free time. So there's at least one edit that I want to make. But other than, keeping it alive until we see what happens, over in ICANN land and whether or not that has any impacts on the draft, I don't currently have anything else queued up. So we can continue to let this one simmer, for as long as we need to, and as long as we're comfortable keeping it simmering.
Yes, that is of course an issue, Scott, because it takes up, of course, some slots in the working group, even though we don't take any time or we don't lose any time on it. But it's something that I think in 1 or 2 years' time nobody will remember anymore what the status of the document is. So that's why I'm calling it out every time that we meet. Alex, you have other comments?
Just a very brief comment. I'm working on an RDAP server that actually uses JVTs to authenticate users. It's not a full OpenID Connect implementation, but at least it understands the beer authentication header. So that's maybe something where I hopefully will have time to review that draft again and provide some feedback, Scott, because it's obviously related.
Yeah, thank you. Much appreciated, Alex.
Yes, thank you too. Okay, then the next document is a document that we recently adopted, which is JS Contact. This document used to be called JCard depreciation. Now, during the adoption of this document, we thought that would not be very much appropriate. It would be appropriate to use this document to define JS Contact in RDAP, but not mandate depreciation of JCard, because it has been implemented already, and I think we need to think a little bit more about that. But since we recently adopted it, I asked Mario and Gavin if they had a presentation on what the status is. They don't have a presentation on this document yet, but do you still want to say anything about it, Mario or Gavin?
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah. I don't know if Gavin is participating at the meeting. It seems that he's not participating. I would simply say that we are just we were just waiting for the outcome of the extended call for working group adoption to move the document forward. I know that there is some interest from Alex Mayrofer and Yazdip to contribute to this document. So I think that if now the document is adopted, we will move the document forward with new updates for the next meeting.
Okay, thank you for that, Mario, for the clarification. Scott, go ahead.
Scott Hollenbeck. Yeah, I think I'm one of the people that was probably the reason for why we needed to do a second, adoption call here. And I think we've gotten past that, right? But my concern was that if we deprecate JCard, right, what that implies is it goes away and everyone who's already implemented and invested the time and effort in getting it working, might find themselves having to throw out something that's, already working and working well. So if we maybe change this from deprecation to an alternative representation, I am less concerned, about adopting the work and taking that on.
Yes, and thank you, Scott, because that's exactly what we were suggesting when adopting this document. So the naming of the document will change, and it will just be using JS Contact. Okay, that was status of existing work of documents without a presentation. Next slide, please, Jim. Next slide, because now we will have some presentation of existing work. And the first one will be the reverse search documents. You get up the presentation, Jim, and then I leave it to Mario to do the presentation. And just say next when you want the next slides, and Jim will. Yeah, we can hear you. We cannot hear Jim because he's on mute.
Yeah, I'm waiting
Waiting for the presentation. Yes.
for the screen displaying the presentation. Okay, let's skip the first two slides that are merely introductory and jump to the third one, please. Okay, I start the review of research document, reverse search document from working group feedback at last meeting. I divided the comments into groups, those regarding the technical issues and those.
It seems like we lost Mario.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, now you're back.
I repeat, but it's something due to Mitico. I didn't touch anything. With regard to the technical issues, Alex said that we need a AAA infrastructure to support reverse search. And about the privacy aspects, Ulrich and Alex agreed that the privacy consideration section should say something more than the statement follow the law. And Tuan suggested to engage the Human Rights Protocol Considerations Work Group to review that section, despite that that working group has already manifested a clear opinion, a negative opinion about the document. Next slide, please. Next slide. Next slide, please. Okay. About the technical issue, no, this is you jump to you skip a slide. Okay. About the technical issues, I agree that with Alex that we do need an AIA infrastructure, but not only for reverse search, but for all the standard searches. I don't see my presentation.
Keep talking. My internet is complaining about not being solid, but here it comes back. I'll
Okay.
just.
The measures to address this solution are well known and are based on the assumption that searches shouldn't be opened to everyone, and consequently limitation and restrictions on patterns and query capabilities, making searches more sustainable, like those described by the recent RFC documents 8977 and 8982, should be differentiated according to the user profile. Next slide, please. About the possible privacy threats, I have not received any feedback, so I took cue from what is reported in the RFC 6973 privacy consideration for internet protocols, and I identified 3 possible threats occurring in this case. One is disclosure, that is the revelation of personal information. The second one is secondary use, the use of collected personal information without the individual consent for a purpose different from that for which the information was collected. And the third one is misuse, the use of information about an individual for a purpose different from that for which the use was requested and approved. Secondary use and misuse seem to be similar, but the first one is related to the use by the data provider, while the second one is related to the use by the data consumer. Next slide, please. Two other privacy threats connected with research search capability are the delivery of PII as a query parameter in a GET request that is not considered a best practice in REST API development, and the ability to detect facts about an individual starting from a PII. I don't know if there is other threats, if you know other threats connected to this particular capability, please share them. Next slide, please. Okay. Before going into much detail with the analysis of privacy threats and the related mitigation measures, I would like to briefly recall some GDPR principles. I refer to GDPR as the most known privacy protection regulation, and I'll hopefully demonstrate in the following that a fully GDPR compliant implementation of reverse search is feasible. I will also refer to OpenID in the following as a protocol for supporting authentication, authorization, and accounting. GDPR states that you must have a lawful basis in order to treat personal data. In the RDAP context, it means that RDAP providers must collect, treat, and provide query capabilities and response contents in compliance with those lawful bases or other local privacy protection laws in force. Please, next slide. Now I go much in detail with the measure to mitigate the privacy threats. As it also stated by RFC 6973, the most common way to mitigate disclosure is by implementing an access control mechanism. This can be done by distinguishing and minimizing query capabilities and response contents on a per role base within identity management. In particular, in OpenID, this can be achieved through the standard scope claim. Other measures are known. In particular, I would like to outline that the first one, that is ensuring that the endpoint of a communication is the one that is intended. The first one is implemented in the current reverse search specification, since the reverse search endpoint is distinguished from the other searches, so that it's easy for the programmer to protect that endpoint and additionally implement additional protection levels can be realized depending on the contact role. I mean, if the contact is a registrant, a technical contact, a registrar, and so on. Please, next slide, please. Protecting against secondary use is usually outside the scope of IETF protocols. In the context of registration data discovery systems, there are registries asking the individual for a generic consent for publishing, including, for example, .it. So they rely on the first GDPR lawful basis to return redacted or unredacted data. But thus far, that consent has been about a lookup capability like a noise query. So this consent is not about a search capability. So I wondered if an ADAP provider supporting reverse search should request the contact for a specific concept. My answer is no, if reverse search is available only to accredited users and interaction with these users is supported by some other lawful basis. Otherwise, if the answer is yes, could be yes, I think that a special concept should also be requested for the provisioning of contact information in a collection of results returned by a standard search. So if we need a special content, we need a special concept for every kind of search, not only for the specific reverse search. Next slide, please. Misuse can be mitigated by requiring the request purpose so that an implementer can reinforce a role-based with a purpose-based access control. In my opinion, that can be achieved by following two different approaches. In the first approach, the registry has a deal of fairness with special categories of accredited users, like police officers and authorities, that are implicitly legitimated to submit their request under a stated purpose. This approach can be implemented by using the ADAP specific purpose claim defined by Scott in the ADAP OpenID extension. Instead, some other registries, including .it for example, requires each time documents assessing that the requester is legitimated to submit a given request, no matter the stated purpose. In this case, a more fine-grained access control can be implemented by assigning the requester with a time-limited credential linked only to the performance of a given request. Next slide, please. Next, the measure to mitigate the delivery of a PIE in a GET request are known. Here again, controlling the access to reverse search capability and obviously securing the transport channel that is providing information on HTTPS. A better solution would be to use a post request, but the post method is not considered in ADAP currently. Anyway, if these measures were not considered sufficient, similarly, we couldn't admit the entities could be searched by an entity name pattern, like that shown in the slide. Next slide, please. To mitigate the risk of using the reverse search in order to detect facts about individuals, the solution is to permit the usage of this capability only to those users that can rely on lawful basis, other than consent for publishing. For the first reported use case, a role-based access control should be enough. The implementers could add an implicit filter to every search, including reverse search, to let the registrars access only the information of their own objects, their own domains and their own contacts, and not the domain and contacts managed by other registrars. For the other two use cases, a purpose-based or an attribute-based access control should be implemented according to the trust model between the registry and the special categories of accredited users. Anyway, I would like to outline that the reverse search is not the only mean by which facts can be detected in ADAP. We can do the same by using the standard searches. Next slide, please. My conclusions about the privacy threats and mitigation are reported in this slide. It is undoubtful that every ADAPT implementation is conditioned by the privacy protection regulation an ADAPT provider must comply with, GDPR or more stringent, I don't know, other regulation. I reported in this presentation some possible privacy threats and mitigation measures. Don't know how much the list is exhaustive. If you think that other privacy threats should be considered, please share them. But my opinion is that all of them are connected not only with the implementation of the reverse search, but with the ADAPT searches in general. As a consequence, ADAPT providers must implement access control measures that are increasingly stringent, depending on the user's categories and the required protection levels. As a basic policy, I would recommend ADAPT providers to not allow the reverse search on the content information whose owners have given their own consent for publishing. So I would recommend to not use the consent for publishing lawful basis as in order to support a reverse search implementation open to everyone. Next slide, please. This is the last slide. This is about human right privacy consideration working group opinion and engagement in reviewing this document. Unlike the human rights protocol, human rights privacy consideration working group, there are some requirements from legal stakeholders to open reverse search to accredit users for abuse and cybercrime investigation. Therefore, if we agree that this document needs an external review, I would simply suggest to bring it to the attention of other forums dealing with all issues of relevance to TLD registry and having a legal foundation or legal implications. Next slide. That's all from my side. I would like to invite everyone to give feedback so I can finally review the privacy considerations section and move the document forward. That's all.
So thank you, Mario, for that good assessment of all the privacy issues that may be in this document. Is there, before I make my comments, is there anybody that wants to make any questions? Jim, you're in the queue first. Go ahead.
Thanks, Antoine. Interesting presentation, Manfredo. Could you please scroll up to the last slide? I'm concerned a little bit about the last bullet point. We're talking for getting people from a legal background to do a review of the document. What would be the purpose of that? Is it to provide legal advice? I don't think the IETF is in a position to do that. I don't think we want the position of having to give what's potential legal advice that has all sorts of legal implications to it. If it's just a sanity check to say, have we considered all the main considerations, then fine. But I think it'd be very problematical to go beyond that point, both from a practical point of view and also because of these legalistic concerns. We all have to bear in mind, of course, that every registry is operating in a different legislative regime, and what's legal in one is not necessarily legal in another. So maybe all we need to put here is, this is what we think are the privacy concerns and issues, but if you want definitive information about these things, please consult your local law enforcement and others. Consult your own lawyers. I don't think going beyond that is a sensible thing to do in an IETF document. Thank you.
I don't know if you want to respond to that, Mario.
I am not in favor of a contribution external to this working group. So coming from outside this working group. I think that no member of this working group have a legal background, so we can discuss about technical problem and not legal problems.
Yeah.
I simply saying that there are requirements coming from legal forums about putting together privacy and accountability. So I'm trying to this document was bought simply to give an answer to the requirements for registrars wishing to search in their own domains and contacts, so they have they were perfectly supported by the GDPR lawful basis, the contract lawful basis to access this capability, and other providers were perfectly supported by this lawful basis in provisioning this capability. But a lot of discussion has been made so far about the privacy concerns. I repeat since the very beginning, the very first beginning, that my opinion is that this kind of search, like the other searches, cannot be open to everyone, but only to accredited users. So, and accredited users who are legitimated to access this capability, like as well the other searches. So, I think that we in my opinion, it seems that outside we are requesting to put together the privacy concern with the other concerns about cybercrime investigation and abuse investigation. This is my opinion. This is my basic principle to move forward this document. So I'm okay.
To give some clarification, you know, for those who haven't followed this document for some time, technically, I think the document is very far in progressing, and we are only looking at what should be in the privacy consideration section. So that's why there is this focus on this. Okay, next in queue, Mark, go ahead.
1 2 1 2. Do you hear me?
Yes.
Well, I know that GDPR is the current example of privacy regulations, but I understand also that many governments are actually looking at it, and obviously they will end up doing a slightly different version of GDPR just because they like to do it their own way. And to a point where maybe some of the comments here may be, not relevant anymore, in the sense that, for some country, maybe I'll throw it something, maybe general access is just fine, but don't show anything, or there's all kinds of variations that could enter, and that could be based on regulation and or policies. So maybe we should be almost, and I'm concerned that it's going to be a rattle. So, my suggestion would be to minimize the amount of words and stuff related to GDPR or privacy, and just say, look at the, regulation and or policy, because my take is we will never end that discussion, because we'll get another, a possible, twist on this, and we'll have to discuss again. So I'm kind of concerned that we're going too deep in it.
Yeah, I agree with you, Mark. The only thing where this document, of course, is different is because this document is the first time where we aggregate data. And that's why there was quite some feedback from the HRPR group that we should have an extensive privacy section. Okay, next, Ulrich, go ahead.
Ulrich. Yes, so as being one of the ones who have always spoken for having a privacy section on this, I would say, first I want to say that I'm really impressed by the work Mario has put into this. I think he has done a really good job in going through all the threads, and I agree that we maybe shouldn't take up GDPR, but all the other privacy threads that Mario has taken up, I think should be documented in the privacy section. And then that's totally okay. Then every implementer can look at their local laws, see what the privacy implications is and where they agree with the law or disagree with the law and implement it according to it. And I think that the whole idea of the privacy section is to just point out this, here are the pain points, look at those. And I think Mario did an excellent job of putting these out today. So thank you, Mario.
Now we only need somebody to write text, right? Thank you, Ulrich. Barry, our AD, you're up next.
I want to highlight some of the things that Jim Reed said, that it's fine to put privacy considerations in. We should do that. We take anybody's input regardless of what their background is or where they come from. So if someone with some legal background makes comments, we consider those comments just as we would from anybody else. But actively soliciting legal review of a document is really on the edge for the IETF. And we certainly don't want any sense in the record that we made an overt effort to get a legal review of a document, because that could come back to bite us later if there are any challenges. So we need to look at what, if we need privacy issues commented on, suggested, commented, reviewed, that's fine, and we should proceed with that. Let's try to keep the idea of legal review out of this.
Thank you. Next, Jim.
Thanks, Antoine.
Thanks, Antoine.
What everybody else has said.
Oh,
Sorry, Jim Reed.
Jim Galvin. First in the queue, James Galvin.
Too many Jims.
My co-chair.
So speaking as an individual, not co-chair, I know that this document stalled because, in this group, we couldn't find consensus on what should go in the privacy consideration section. There is some text that's there, and I appreciate that, Mario kind of walked through, a lot of the motivation and issues that were considered in drafting the text that's there. So, certainly the question to date in this working group is, are we past the privacy considerations section in the document? And all of that's there. However, what I wanted to raise is focusing more on the technical side of this document. I've been reflecting on this document and looking at it. And of course, I've been involved in a lot of RDAP discussions on the policy side, which I know is not normally something the IETF really thinks about. But as a result of that, I'm evolving a different kind of technical perspective about this document and thinking that there's some work that we ought to consider that I'd like to propose. I'm a little concerned about the fact that this document focuses on directionality, so it's called reverse search. And I'm deciding that, at least for me, I'm not fond of that. And I'd like to visit that in this working group and on the mailing list. The RDAP documents do have a certain searching specification. I'd rather see this document expand searching and talk about other ways to do additional kinds of searching and not focus on directionality. And then there's also some emphasis on, being able to search because of particular elements like name and email address. And I'm thinking you really ought to abstract back and talk about elements, and think about, and thus it would be more applicable to be more extensible rather than focusing on just a couple of things and how to do those. It should have an extensible mechanism for what you can specify, what you get. Anyway, my guess in summary, I'm beginning to develop in my own mind some technical questions about how to approach what this document does. And I'm thinking I'm going to raise those on the mailing list, and that's separate from the fact that we're trying to deal with what the privacy considerations ought to be. So I don't want to close that question because that's been open, but I'm kind of opening a new one that I'm going to raise on the mailing list to move this forward. So that's it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you, Jim. Next up, Richard. Go ahead.
Very much. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
My graph is moving. Thank you very much. Very briefly, just wanted to offer a comment on one of the slides here. These slides aren't numbered. A little bit earlier, there was a comment about allowing registrars to search only their own contacts. It occurs to me that this is presupposing a couple of things. One, about a model of reverse search or search, to sort of get to Jim Galvin's point, that presupposes search at a registry and in a registry registrar model. And perhaps registrars actually would have their own data already and probably wouldn't need to be searching the registry. So it might be a possibility to simplify the document in that regard and not concern themselves, because I'm not really sure why the registrars would need to be searching the registry, since the registrar is really authoritative for the contact data, and the registry only has a copy of data which may or may not be accurate. It might be privacy proxied or something like that. So maybe that's an opportunity to simplify it. And then, it was interesting to see Jim Galvin bring that comment up about some of the differences in search there. And so I'll be looking forward to seeing that be explored on the list. I hadn't thought about that when I got into Q, obviously, since Jim hadn't made it, but I just thought I'd tack that on at the end. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Thank you, Richard. I think the difference there is between thin and thick registries where you want to do reverse search. But I'll let Mario speak later because I see he's still in the queue. But Jim is waiting also for quite some time. So Jim, please go ahead.
Thanks, Antoine. I hope this is the right Jim this time. I just want to go back to this issue about the privacy consideration stuff. Mario's done a great job of enumerating many of these privacy concerns and mitigation techniques, and I was not trying to disparage that work in any way. But I think to make some progress with this document on that particular area, I think we need to draw a line under it. And I think the formal words we probably want to use here is something that says, this is the collective understanding of the working group's knowledge of this subject area at this time. There may be other issues, there might not. If you want to know more about that, consult your local lawyers. I think that's all we can really do here. And if we did that, we could close off that section of the document and we'd avoid some of the rat holing. I think it was Ulrich mentioned earlier on as a potential possibility if we try to keep exploring this. And we've got the potential to dig and keep on digging and maybe never ever get to a conclusion. So I think the wise thing to do is make a decision, hopefully soon, that this is as far as we can go, and then try to progress the rest of the document, because there's other stuff that I think is perhaps more in need of attention that's just been talked about. Thank you.
Thank you, Jim. And if you support this, there should be consensus on the mailing list, and that's what we've done so far. And so far, there was no consensus on the mailing list on the privacy consideration section. So if there's consensus on the mailing list, then we can move this document forward. And Mario, I leave you to respond to all the comments.
Yes, I am very happy to hear that we can move the document to face the technical topics, technical issues. And a brief comment about what said Richard. We have in .it we have a lot of little registrars, small registrars. They simply relying on the information stored by the registry, maintained by the registry, so that they don't have enough. They don't spend effort in implementing and maintaining their own information about contacts. This and other and server, for example, they simply rely on the fact that that information is maintained by the registry. So we are frequently requested for example, the number of contacts, technical contacts associated to this domain, or what are the number? Sorry, what are the domains associated to this technical contact? What are the domains associated to this register? Because they don't have this information. But in our regulation, in .it regulation, you cannot, as a registrar, you cannot access the information of another registrar. So this is why I imagine that that registrars cannot manage the information of the other register, and it makes sense for us that a registrar could search, could execute a reverse search on their own, on his own domains or contacts, because they don't have this information. I don't know if I explained the concept well.
Okay, thank you, Mario. Then Scott, final comments?
Yes, Scott Hollenbeck. And while we were talking here, I had a revelation. Mario, you had asserted in your deck that this thing that we are calling reverse search has some of the same concerns, properties, whatever we want to call it, as the search mechanism that's currently described in 7482. And I think I can think of one very tangible difference. And that's what's in 7482 is about searching using pattern matching techniques, right? But what we are calling this thing called reverse search is more about finding relationships. And I can see them having very different privacy considerations. If you're allowing search, to find relationships, you're potentially going to find things that exist in the database that aren't necessarily meant to be exposed. Whereas the stuff that we've got in 7482 is more about, as I said, you're just doing very simple pattern matching. Anyway, I wanted to throw that out there because I think if we start talking about how we look at search in general, that distinction may be important.
Thank you, Scott. Mario, one last comment because we are.
Yes. Yes, I would like simply answer Scott. When I talk about other searches than reverse search are able to detect facts about the individual, I would like to give you this example. I use a lookup domain to get the information about the domain. For example, I know I get the name server and rely on the fact that, for example, if normally if an owner, a registrant owner, has more than one domains, all these domains are associated with the same name server. So I can use the search domain. I can search domains by net server name to collect all the domains related to this name server, and I can check what are the domains owned by the same owner. So, in my opinion, the means through which in RDAP we can detect facts are various, but I know that there are search patterns, but anyway, in the example of entities, for example, in the example of the searching entities by the name could be a plain name, not a search pattern including a wildcard. So in this case, you are delivering a GET request through the network with a plain name that presumably will be stored in some proxy, but this is the protocol. So the best practice suggests to provide personal information through a post method, not through the get method, but this is the protocol. So for this reason, I wonder why reverse search is so particular, is so special. It doesn't seem to me so special compared to the other searches. I think that it is different in the sense that we came from a world where there was the WIS, and the WIS response was a lookup response. Now we have the lookup responses, lookup searches and responses to lookup searches, and lookup queries, and also search queries. So we can provide a collection of objects, not only one object. So in this sense, it seems to me that reverse search is not so particular, is similar to the other searches.
Okay, thank you, Mario. Then we will move on to our next presentation, and let's get the privacy section discussed on the mailing list. Next presentation will be Mark Blanchet about 7484 bis. Mark, go ahead.
Yes, do you hear me?
Yes, excellent.
Thank you. Okay, so this is about RFC 7484 next version. Next slide, please. So to recall, this document is to find the authoritative RDAP server for the object you're looking for, either domain, IP addresses, AS numbers. The objective for this draft is to, together with the other base RFC, RDAP RFCs, is to move up to the standard level. So next slides will present the errata from the RFC, some changes, Shepherd comments, and next steps. Next slide. So first errata, the person who reported saying that there's a text about what happens if you don't get any response for the object you're looking for in DNS. You can query the DNS and do various stuff. And the person says either change the text or remove the paragraph. Next slide. So the current draft actually added, changed a bit the text, but I'm proposing instead that we just delete this whole paragraph. I think that is remaining to the discussion we had a long time ago about if this is this do we need to cache stuff and all that. I think that's roughly relevant based on experience, and I can claim to have some experience in this, having written a few of the RDAP clients and servers. I think we should just delete that. It's it's up to implementation to do all kind of stuff they want, but from the purpose of the document, which is essentially saying here's a way you can find the server, the authoritative server of for the object you're looking for. Everything else is, to me, out of scope. So my suggestion is that we delete this paragraph. I would suggest that I go through all the slides, and I'll take the questions at the end, if you don't mind. Next slide. There was an errata. There was a slash missing in the example, so it needs to be done. Agreed. It's already in the draft. Next slide. So those are the two erratas for that were provided to the RFC editor. Next, I'll go through some changes. There was a suggestion from Gavin Brown to say essentially all RDAP endpoints referred by the URLs in the array must return identical responses for the same RDAP query. And next slide. So that's in the current draft. And then also George Michelson went further down in saying, we should all the endpoints referenced by the URLs should in the array must return identical response, but notices may have things different because they may say things here and there. Maybe I'm in the make it short mood, but I would essentially also just not essentially be silent on this. I'm not sure we're actually doing something useful here in even saying that the two RDAP all the servers should respond the same thing, and I think the comment from George actually just show it, where it may make sense that other different servers may answer different just some variations of the same thing, while not I guess disabling the overall idea of the document or the bootstrap thing. So I'm suggesting also that we should be silent about all this altogether. Next slide. Some refs have been updated, TLS 1.3. Next slide. Comments on the mailing list. I think that was from Patrick also. There was a comment about do we have some data about IANA having any issues on serving those files, and asking for statistics. I didn't get any statistics, but response from IANA, Kim Davies, says there's no issue. And frankly, the size of those files are similar to when you open a website currently and you download a JavaScript framework file. So I'm not sure that's really a problem. And as soon as you get a CDN up, then it's not an issue. The sentence has been changed slightly to say that no issues has been reported regarding the load of the service. Change to SR. There was a comment that we should change back to SRV records. I'm not sure we want to reopen the whole discussion again we had in WIRDS. pros and cons in each approaches. So I'm kind of rejecting that comment unless you want to, the group want to reopen the whole discussion. There was other comments about restricting to HTTPS only URL in the services array instead of having HTTP also, given that some policies for some environments are restricting to HTTPS only, and then the IETF is HTTPS. I'm kind of in between there. To me, it's a bit out, it's a bit policy related in the sense that, maybe somewhere, serving something maybe on HTTP for some reason, but I'm open to anything. And I'm not sure we have a conclusion in the mailing list about this topic. Next slide. So this is kind of I got the review from the Dr. Shepard. There's a lot of things there. I put it there mostly for, making sure that, I'm transparent and I'm saying everything. So I'm kind of okay with most of the comments you made, in the first slide here. Only thing that I will talk later is about implementation status. So so there were a few comments I was not sure it was really needed, but I'm fine with adding them. Next slide. Other comments from the Dr. Shepard. There was an entry of the so there's a text in the draft and the RFC that says the entry of the root of the domain space is specified as essentially an empty string. The Dr. Shepard looked at the current Bootstrap file and there's no such entry, and he's asking if the sentence is not needed. I disagree. This entry is needed as soon as IANA put his IANA server up and serving kind of the root of the main space, that sentence is appropriate and needed. So I disagree with that one. And there was some discussion, some comments about using IPv4 and IPv6 and AS private reserved for documentation. I'm using some of those. I was aware of all those, but I'll try to, change the examples so I'm only using those. So we'll hopefully that will work. And there's a catch of a little inconsistency in the example, so we'll do that too. Next slide. So again, AS IPv6 address for documentation. There's a comment about an extra 0. I was trying to make clear, but I can remove. AS number reserved for documentation also. Next slide. And again about the same paragraph about in terms of a domain object you could do DNS queries, and the guy saying the Dr. Shepard says maybe we should remove that sentence. I'm suggesting we remove the whole paragraph. Therefore, this gone. And the final one is, I think, from his comments, is about a reference to a draft, which, and I'm not aware that this document has been published as an RFC, but I think still appropriate to refer to that work. So I would leave it as is. Next slide. So to my knowledge, we need a kind of implementation status in documents moving forward to standard. So here's a call to everybody who have done a quote implementation that it's not really a full protocol itself, but so if you fetch and parse one of the Bootstrap files, could you send me an email about that, and so I can collect it and create a section with implementation status. As far as I know, there is the mobile app I wrote, RDAP browser, ICANN lookup tool as one or two, And IANA is obviously the publisher of the files, therefore they have an implementation of that bootstrap file. They do not fetch or parse, but they write. So if you have, if you are parsing that file, fetch and parse, then please contact me, by email. So I'll kind of collect all those implementation status. And I think I'm mostly done. Next slide. So looking for comments on all the topics I discuss. If given that if changes are agreed for all those changes, and that you trust me in applying it, and I'm receiving implementation information from implementers, maybe we're ready for publication. So that's the end of my presentation. Looking for comments. One, two. Anybody hear me?
Does anybody have any questions to Mark? Alexander, you're up next.
Very quick and simple. Go for it. It's simple enough. I don't see any changes that would impact any protocol details or anything. Waiting for implementation reports is a good idea, but otherwise, please go forward and please get the document out as fast as possible. It's simple enough.
Thanks.
Well, thank you, Mark. And if there's nothing else, then we'll continue this work on the mailing list, and let's move this document along quite quickly then. And then, Jim, if we can go back to indeed the next sections will be new work and request for adoptions, and we have one presentation in that, and that's from Dimitri on the use of internationalized email addresses. So, Dimitri, the floor is yours.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, excellent.
Okay, wonderful. Next slide, please. First, let's begin with a short reminder about the current email address internalization status. It was specified in the set of RFCs 6530 to 6533. It allows non-ASCII left part of email addresses, and it requires more or less explicit protocol changes for all the protocols that refer to the previous standard describing the email address. Next slide, please. My intention is introduce the support of AI in EPP protocol, and I think that such introducing should cover all the EPP objects that support email as an attribute, and such addresses should be first-class option. Next slide, please. So, after the fruitful discussion on the mailing list and off-list, we came to the concept of a functional extension. It's a new form of EPP extension. It does not define any new object or object attributes, but slightly modifies the rules of handling them. It just applies the functional capability to existing set of attributes and objects. In this document, we introduce functional EP extension for the email address field. Please, next slide. Here is the link to the current version of the document. In short, it doesn't introduce any XML schema changes because the current syntax formally allows AI addresses. But we apply the processing rules on the precedent of the extension support demonstrated in the login command from the client and greeting from server. The support is indicated by a special namespace. Next slide, please. If the extension is negotiated, then server should accept the email addresses that have valid syntaxes according to RFC 6531 in all the elements with email semantics. For example, in contact email defined in RFC 5733, in the org email RFC 8543, and many other documents. Server should accept such addresses for all the registry zones which are operated in the current session, and for all the objects. The addresses should be validated according to the IAA validation rules. The email attributes should be stored and returned as is according to the universal acceptance rules in the part of email addresses. Next slide, please. When the extension is negotiated, the client should provide AI-compatible addresses for all the email properties in the current session. The same examples. Client should apply such addresses for all the registry zones that are accessible to the client in the current session, and accept such addresses in the EP responses for all email attributes received from the server. Next slide, please. Well, we described the situation, what happens when client and server both support the international addresses. And now we should specify the behavior when server supports such address and client doesn't, and vice versa. So, if server supports AI and client does not, then the server should validate the email property, the email attributes sent by client using the ASCII email validation rules. And if the email property is optional and the client supplies it, the server should validate it using the ASCII validation rules either. Then next slide, please. If server sends a email attribute in response, the server must validate whether the email property is not ASCII one, and if so, the server should return the predefined placeholder email, or if it's ASCII, it should return the original value of the email address. When such attribute is optional, server again must validate whether it's internationalized or not, and in case of AI, it should not return the address, but return it if it's ASCII. Next slide, please. When we have a client that supports AI addresses but not supporting server, when the property is required according to the EP syntax and the client has no alternative ASCII address, but only international one, the client must provide some predefined placeholder email address to indicate that, in fact, it's a international address. When this property is optional and the client has only international address, the client should omit the email property. Then next slide, please. So the placeholder address is not defined yet in the document. I think that there are two possible options. First of all, is using some well-known address, for example, from example.com. And the other possible option is using the registry-specific address, which can be set by the registry from one of the controlled namespaces to ensure that it will not clash with any really possible address. The next slide, please. As we have a discussion on the mailing list, as I think that it's important to add the support of the international email addresses to the EP protocol, I kindly ask the working group to adopt this document and begin the process of working with it as a working group documents. Many thanks.
Okay, thank you, Dimitri. Are there any questions or remarks? So I understood it correctly, Dimitri, that you're requesting for this document to be adopted?
Yes.
Yeah, so the document itself and not the work, right? Because we had some discussion on the mailing list where we were still discussing whether or not there should be an extension or other documents that need to be adjusted. So to be clear, okay.
Yes, we have chosen the option to remove the necessity of any extension.
Mm-hmm.
And well, we have a loophole. We have a current syntax that formally allows, and this is so this is a document that just indicated we should use this loophole.
Okay, very well. Thank you. Questions, Ulrich? Go ahead.
Ulrich, I have a comment, I would say, and that is, I think in the case that the server requires an email address, so the client has to send one, I really don't think that the placeholder would actually work, because that doesn't actually fulfill the requirement. I mean, for example, you could have legal requirement to give your email address. And so a placeholder wouldn't fulfill the requirement. So I don't think that that is really an option to go here. Okay, that's one more comment. Thank you.
Fair point, but I'm not sure it's in the scope of the IETF.
Okay, next one, Alexander. Go ahead.
Thank you, Dimitri. Let me say first that I appreciate the change that we don't need to support any kind of extension for this, because I think that makes it much more sensible than a full extension. Secondly, I think we need to double check this, but as far as I know, for just getting the namespace URI, I don't think an RFC is even required, isn't it? So the XML namespace registry is probably specification required. So a local specification of your registry would probably do enough for the namespace registration. Of course, I understand the intent to make this a standard, or let me put it that way, RFC that goes through the Regext working group, but it might not even be necessary if you stick to just.
Yes, yes. There is no formal there is no formal necessity to register a namespace, but I think it would be very useful to have a universal way to deal with international email addresses that can be used with all the registries and registrars instead of currently locally defined operation practice.
Okay, next in line, James, go ahead. James Gould, yep.
Can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes.
Ah, there you go. Fantastic. Hey, I wanted to jump in and just to help the working group understand that this is a new form of EPP extension. So we said it's not an extension. It really is an extension. But it's a different form because it doesn't add any new elements. It's actually an override of the existing elements that have been negotiated in the EPP session. So this provides for a lot more easy implementation, but it's really important from a signaling perspective because if a server in fact supports international email addresses, they can communicate that, but they're committing to a specific set of behavior. And similarly, the client is also signaling and agreeing to a particular behavior as well. So yes, you could go and register a namespace, but there's a lot more to it than registering a namespace. There are certain obligations that are necessary for this to work. And then in addition, I wanted to hit it on the placeholder text. That is probably the biggest item for this working group to figure out. Because as I guess it was Alexander that brought up the fact that there may be a legal requirement to do it, but from a protocol perspective, it's a required element. It's up to server policy to decide what to do with it if they require something other than the placeholder. But there's not a whole lot of other options that we could think of. Because if it's required and the client doesn't have the appropriate value, either they can't send it or the server will fail it, or they pass a placeholder element and the server will accept it. So that's it.
Thank you, James,
Thank you.
for that clarification. I hope everybody understands it. Then that was the last in our queue. So Dimitri, I want to say if you formally want to have this document adopted, send an official request to the chairs and we will put out a formal call for adoption.
Okay, thank you very much. I will send the formal request. Many thanks for the clarification on the procedure.
Yeah, and then we will do the rest of the work on the mailing list.
Thank you.
Okay, Jim. Next slide, milestone review. I think you will take up this point again, Jim. Or do you still have connection issues?
No, my connection seems to be holding out, so that's a good thing. Otherwise, it would have dropped me like it did before, and it dropped all the presentation. It's sort of ugly. Okay, so, you know, as chairs, we have tried. Oh, James Gould, do you have your hand up? Is that an old hand or?
I'll remove him from the queue.
Okay, old hand. So, you know, the chairs got together and we just sort of made up a slide. And I'm being fair and telling you what's going on. You know, we're trying to manage our milestones and we don't seem to get a lot of input from folks here on the group. So we just kind of made some stuff up here, and that's just a way of leaning on folks and saying, you know, if you don't like it, that's fine. please propose something different that keeps things organized, and we're happy to take that on board. So the things which are in italics here are already on our milestone list. The things that are not in italics are new items. And for the items that were on the list, you can see in parentheses there what the old milestone date was. And so we're just proposing a new date, and we've just kind of structured what we think appears to be the energy in the working group as far as moving things forward. And so we just kind of laid things out in that way, and gave ourselves a little time to go through the different documents. So, I mean, there was a little bit of method in our methodology here, but, you know, frankly, it was just our view of what we see going on in the group. As always, you know, our work is dependent on people wanting to push it forward. So if you feel like you want to jump on something and move it along quicker, then, you know, we're happy to negotiate some milestones here and move stuff around. We basically took a model of trying to order the documents in terms of what we think is most relevant. And then we deliberately just kind of chose every 2 months to sort of separate the documents a little bit. I mean, we seem to mostly do one thing at a time in this group. Just feels like the way that we tend to work best. So we kind of ordered them based on what we think is, you know, discussion that has to happen or is happening. And, you know, again, you can disagree with us if you don't like this order. Registry maintenance, we're just kind of carrying forward. We've kind of figured that one's pretty close to done. You know, 7484 biz is a new document. We just figure we'll do that next because I don't think there's a lot of discussion or work that has to happen there. We just talked about RDAP search a bit. I think this is a bit of discussion to have there about maybe changing a little bit, or at least opening the question of what might be in the document. That's my personal contribution as opposed to chair contribution. So we kind of move things that way. With registration reporting, there's a bit of coordination to do with registrars on the ICANN side. So it just felt like pushing that out a little bit seemed like the right thing to do, allow some extra time for some discussion there on that topic. JS Contact, we do have a fairly significant issue to get through in terms of discussions about JCard versus JS Contact. And part of the reason for pushing that out is not so much the technical discussion, but also that sort of discussion about its status as compared to JCard. And in fairness, I would imagine in this, just like with registration reporting, we'll reach out to do a little joint work specifically with ICANN's Tech Ops group, where the registrars and their technical folks tend to sit, and we'll sort of create an interim meeting and an opportunity to have a joint meeting so we can get some really good input on that side with respect to that issue. So it felt appropriate to push that out. And then as Scott kind of said with OpenID, we're kind of waiting for the opportunity to do some interoperability testing and implementation experience. I mean, yeah, we kind of have a really nice document there. It seems pretty well, pretty stable. But then again, we're waiting for an external event. You know, we're expecting, you know, some policy work on the ICANN side that will motivate the deployment of some kind of authenticated queries in RDAP. And thus we will actually want to engage in testing and trying some things out and seeing if it works. And so it seems appropriate to hold that document for, you know, for that work to continue and to move on. And Scott, you have a hand up, so please, if I misrepresented that, please do correct me.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Scott Hollenbeck. Yeah, I should just remind folks that back when we were doing some of the original RDAP pilot work in the ICANN context, there were several implementations of this particular draft, you know, that demonstrated both function and interoperability, right? So, you know, modulo anything we might decide to change, I mean, I think we've already kind of checked that particular box. You know, the real issue here is there going to be anything changing in the policy space such that we have to change some of the, you know, proposals for registering attributes associated with identities? Okay, I mean, obviously that's not all of it, of course. I mean, over time we might have to change more, but basic functionality, we've got that nailed. In fact, there's an implementation status section in the document that describes some of those past successes already.
Thanks for that, Scott. I agree with you. You're absolutely right. The document really is pretty stable. I guess, just kind of stepping back a bit, I might restate what I said in the form of, there's just no urgency for this at the moment. And so there's no pain, if you will, involved in pausing while we wait for some urgent need for it to give us a chance to test some things and see how it really works. Beyond just the technical elements of it. So hopefully there's not a lot there, but we're just giving ourselves time and letting it simmer. I think that was the word you used, Scott. Just let it simmer for a while longer. It's not in the way. So anyway, that's there. We'll obviously have to add the EAI document, assuming we adopt that. We'll add that. It's not on the list at the moment because it's not yet adopted. But if we get past that far, we'll slot that in here somewhere along the way. Anyway, again, I guess the end of this is, this is our proposal. At least we'll update our milestones this way. In fairness, we should send this off to the mailing list and just, wait to see if there's any real discussion. But I would say that unless anyone objects or wants to make a different proposal, we will update our milestones to reflect this sometime in the next couple of weeks, just so that we're accurately recording our level of effort and our work here. And I guess that's it. There's no other questions. Back to you, Antoine.
Yeah, then we'll go to the next slide. And that's actually the any other business. Or is there anybody that has any other business? Otherwise, I will have one at least. But I first want to give the opportunity to anybody else.
Well, I'd like to say, this is Barry. I'd like to say thanks, guys, for all the work you guys do, the chairs, the working group, everybody. This is a productive working group, and I'm pleased with that, and so thanks. And I'm turning this over this week to Murray, who co-chaired the amusingly named working group that created RDAP in the first place, and is now back as y'all's AD. So, Murray, you want to say a hey?
Sure. Morning, everyone, where I am, and I'm looking forward to working with you all. This looks like this has been a pretty productive working group so far. No big contentions, which is a load off my mind. So thank you, Barry, for all the work you did. I just counted it something like nine or 10 documents have gone through with your name on them as the sponsoring AD. So more than any other AD that's worked with this one. So you know this group better than any other. Looking forward to working with you all.
Yeah, that was actually also my any other business topic that I wanted to discuss. Jim and I had some other area directors with this working group and with our predecessor working group, and Barry was with us the longest. And we must say we want to thank very, very much. He's been very supportive with us, and he understood how this working group works very much. So I hope you will all join me and thank Barry for his fantastic job that he did. Thank you, Barry.
Yeah, let me jump the queue a little bit on Alexander, since Barry beat us to the punch here and jumped me to the any other business. And little chair's prerogative. Sorry, Alex. But yeah, I want to thank Barry, very much. It certainly has been a pleasure to work with Barry. As Antoine said, he's been with us the longest. Sometimes I feel a little bit like the orphan working group. We kind of like we're marching through area directors for a while there, like nobody really wanted us. But Barry hung in there and kept us on the straight and narrow, and has been very helpful to us a couple of times here as we bumped into some interesting situations. But it's all been very good. We're very happy to return back to Murray with respect to RDAP especially. But looking forward to having you as our AD in this, and we hope you stick it out for your entire term with us while you're the new AD. So just a special thank you from me, as well as the working group and Antoine, Barry. It's been a pleasure, and so happy to have you here. So with that, back to you, Antoine, and I assume Alex.
Yes. So any other business, Alex?
Thank you, Antoine. Just a short, maybe no, I didn't want to share the screen. I did want to send video. There you go. I felt something to make an observation, and that is, I think that we can as a working group, we can actually be pretty quick if we focus on a certain topic, and that topic doesn't have any external dependencies. Yeah, we get really slow when it gets to issues that are like a little bit outside of the scope of the working group. Let me put it that way, like the privacy discussion on the reverse search thing, because I think you would be able to like finalize the technical parts of that within weeks. Yeah, and that's true for a lot of the other drafts maybe as well. As soon as there is something that's like, well, either controversial or not in the perfect technical part of the competence of the working group, then it gets really slow. So and for that, I think that interim meetings focusing as a working session on a specific document with the interested people could work really well. And after that, I think the only thing that we need to do is prod enough people to say yes to the working group last call. So that's maybe an observation with regards to the milestones, because I think some of the milestones are like years out there in the future. And I think we should maybe reiterate over the milestones and look at whether any of those documents has any external or non-technical issue that prevents us from going forward. Yeah. I mean, OpenID is, for example, an example where we probably depend on whatever CPA TechOps comes out together with the ICANN policy people. But there are hopefully other things on the milestones list which are quicker as soon as we find a group of a few people who are willing to spend an afternoon or maybe even 2 afternoons on it. Just an observation.
Well, thank you, Alex. Well, coming back from my side is also that, we are a small working group. And we also realize, that if there are 5 or 10 people working on one document, you cannot ask them to work on another document simultaneously. That's also, of course, one of the observations that we have. Sometimes there's a lot of traction on a document and things goes fast, and everybody agrees. But sometimes it also takes time for people to read, and it's mostly the same people. So yes, I think Jim and I would very much like, everybody that's in the TechOps group to also be in the Regext group. But I only see 37 people on my screen now, and not 100.
Yeah, I think I'll just add one takeaway I took from what you said, Alex. I mean, you're right. But one specific concrete takeaway I took from what you just said is we should make our milestones more visible to ourselves on a regular basis. We don't often go through them. We did this time because we kind of had a lot of publications last year when there's a lot of change. So we took a visit of them. But I know that other working groups tend to put the milestone list in front of themselves, every meeting. And we should certainly do that. And we can do that here for ourselves too. We can make them more visible just to remind people of what's there in the documentation. A second takeaway I took from what you said is interim meetings. I want to remind the working group that we've had some very successful interim meetings here. The fee extension draft was one in particular that sticks out in my mind. It was Roger and Jody who had a particular interest in moving that forward. And in fact, they sponsored the interim meetings. And they were set up and they were remote meetings, so it wasn't even a physical meeting that you had to go be there. And they really worked out very well. They were specific. The working meeting, they had an agenda, technical issues, and it was just focused. And so I think that helped move that document along. It languished for a long time until those guys picked it up and moved it along. And so that opportunity exists, and we'll support that. And the IETF has facilities for supporting that too, if you need a way to run the meeting. But, there's no obligation really, as long as a group of people want to meet, as long as you declare it and make it open for anybody, you can have any kind of meeting you want, any way that you want. There's no real requirements except that it be visible and possible for, people to join. And we'll help you and support that. So, thanks for that, Alex. Those are my two key takeaways from what you said. I agree with everything else you said too.
Okay, then if there is no any other business, then I think we had a very successful meeting. We give you back 10 minutes of your time, and we'll talk to each other in the on the mailing list. So thank you all. Meeting adjourned.
Thank you.
Oh, minutes. I need to collect the minutes. Thank you, Alex, for taking the minutes.